create Proxy, which is a form of temporary file intended to replace that original source or the original footage to be able to do the rendering a little bit faster, especially when you're working in really high resolution footage that just really drains your computer of a lot of energy. As in when the computer just doesn't love all those hundreds of layers in the timeline. So you can either create a still proxy from an image or a video. Perhaps you want to use it as a type of reference image for a video, or you can also always throw in a movie proxy as whenever your processor or your computer just had enough of all those 4K plus videos. This will set up the file in the render queue to render out our new proxy file for a temporary replacement. And by dropping down on the little arrow on the left, we can be viewing all our render settings for the proxy. To change any of them, you can just click either on the other drop-down arrow, choose between some of the presets, using a predefined or a default type of configuration that determine how the composition will render, a bit dependent on the typical use case, or just create a custom one yourself. While being able to create render settings templates, this allows you to create and save your custom settings as a template for any type of future use. This is just very useful whenever you're having some type of render settings that you are using frequently or very often. Another enter as well to the render settings is by pressing the blue text, and it gives us some precise adjustment for how we want our proxies to be rendered. For example, dropping down the quality and resolution to kind of optimize the speed in the composition. You might want to drop these ones as low as possible, but without going way too crazy. And draft quality and a quarter of the resolution, somewhere around there might be quite good start. So we have a bunch of different type of options depending on the specific need to either turn on and off. Plus, checking out time sampling concerning frame blending. We got field render as when using the interlaced formats. Choose to include motion blur, time span, plus frame rate. Then for the output model, drop down on the arrow and you can see the settings here as well. And this one will determine how frames shall be rendered or processed into what specific type of final output folder. With the render settings, there's another drop-down arrow giving us the most common output models as presets. We can change to any type of custom ones as well. Or perhaps we want to make template here as well for multiple different uses. Press the blue text to enter the output model settings. The format specifies the type of file your rendered output will be, such as a QuickTime or a AV or AVI file, both when you're rendering proxies or as well when for the real final rendered output. And this choice will impact the whole file compatibility and as well as the sizing and the quality. So it's especially important for the final renderer or the final output. And this specific type of format also is directly linked to unlocking some specific type of compressions and codecs. So you should really know what type of format you need for what type of specific action. Moreover, for choosing a video output in the current settings, we're able to use channels like separate RGB, Alpha, or both RGB plus Alpha. Heading into the format options, the video codec is currently animation, but I normally prefer the ProRes here instead. So the 422 will be quite a normal good use, especially for the final output. One directly intended for Proxy, and for those higher quality project, either a minimum of ProRes 422 with a high quality, or we can go all the way up to those really high quality at 4444 and the XQ version of it. But these files will be quite massive, so it's just when we really need it. Then we may also change to the popular compressed codec like the H.264, advanced video coding AVC, and a few more options will appear with this one, such as a specific type of encoding settings profile for different type of constraints and controls depending on at what level. Bitrate settings, the CBR, as a type of constant bitrate, keeping the data rate consistent for each frame, no matter what the actual complexity of the frame is. So sometimes this can be a little bit inefficient as it's using the same type of data rate for example, a black screen when there's actually nothing there compared to a very complex frame. So it can sometimes be a little bit more inefficient and taking more space than perhaps might be necessary. The VBR, or the variable bitrate, one pass, adjusts the data rate a bit dependent on the complexity within the scene or within the actual frame. So if you have one frame here that's a little bit more simple, not as complex, it will use less data on this one. While on this one here, this other frame that's a little bit more complex, it will put more data into this one. So it's just a little bit more effective or efficient than the CBR. But at the same time, it takes a little bit longer to encode it, but it also gives smaller file sizes. And it's a bit dependent on the project, but normally as well, it will result in a better quality. Finally here, we may possibly adjust the keyframe as in a so-called iframe, a whole frame encoded in its entirety. We may set it to 1 for every frame, or we might also raising it a bit to skip a few and raising the number for less visual data. Thus, we're also creating smaller file sizes overall, but we'll get a decrease in the quality. Anyway, I will choose the Apple ProRes 4444 for this one, for the sake of showing the next one. So this option currently gives us the depth options of either millions of colors or all the way up to trillions. However, the options available are influenced by the project's bit depth, a little bit of the output format's capabilities, as well if you need to include a type of alpha channel in it, and also with actual render settings that's been chosen. For example, when the channel is set to RGB, the depth says trillions of colors now, but if I were to change the channel to RGB plus alpha, it will automatically add a plus in the end and indicating an actual alpha channel will be included in it. There's the possibility to change color between the pre-multiplied math or straight unmatted or clean. If we want to, for whatever reason, we can always be giving a helping hand to resize the width and height, or just change to a preset format and choose its quality. Crop the rendered output if you only need certain parts of the image, perhaps just half a video for a reference. Then it's done over here by changing the margins or cropping from all directions if needed. Finally, choose to include a separate audio on to create one, whether there's actually audio on the file or not, auto only if there is one, or just turn it off. In the color tab, rounding it off with doing some final adjustments for the output, preserve RGB and linear light. Now for this proxy, I will change the format again to the Apple ProRes 422 proxy to save a little bit of some otherwise massive file sizes. Lastly, the output to, how to name the file, or just click the text to write it manually and save it on your drive. And as soon as we're ready with all the type of settings, any type of adjustments, we're done, over, out, hit that render. The current render shows us this type of blue progress bar to indicate when the rendering is complete, plus in percentage, total frames, and the frames left. Under info, getting a little bit more details of the whole process, if you will. Either pause or stop the render completely. In this bar below, a few more options. You can also get a notify whenever ready for those really long time renderers. We might also log errors only. Then once the render is complete, you should have a separate proxy file, plus be able to see the file in the project panel with this new little grayish box, if you will, to the very left of it. Now be able to toggle the proxies on and off by just clicking this box icon. Now, when a proxy is created, we could just right-click any type of footage, press Set Proxy and File, and that proxy will now overlay that footage as well. So, very handy. There's also a few other type of different render order, which, according to Adobe, and I will quote, within each raster or non-vector layer, elements are applied in the following order: masks, effects, transformations, and layer styles. For continuously rasterized vector layers, the default rendering order is masks, transformations, and then effects. This is another one of those important things to know about to actually be able to display the correct visual that you're actually after within the final renderer, as it's directly impacting how the composition will be calculated and kind of displayed. So by ignoring the render process, it might lead to some unexpected or weird visual looks. So if you encounter any problem with some type of weird look of the final renderer, then it might be the render order that's not really correct.